Hello all. Very happy to be here this morning. And as Carol alluded to, not only am I one of 11 children, raised in a family business environment, my husband and I for 23 years founded and operated a family business. So I think that I know firsthand how challenging it can be to facilitate effective communication when you overlay family dynamics. In my business, I focus exclusively on the soft skills, the relationships. I believe that relationships are the most frustrating as well as the most rewarding aspect of our life. And I think the quality of our relationships has an incredible impact on the quality of our life. So I coach, train, reinforce, and support within organizations and their leaders to be more conscious, to adopt more conscious business practices. And to me, the word consciousness refers to a higher level of emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is your ability to monitor your own feelings and your own emotions, to discriminate among those, and to use this information to guide your actions and your thoughts. And I believe leaders of the future need to start leading with emotional intelligence, EQ instead of IQ, and this is why. We have 3 centers of intelligence, 3 ways in which we take in information. We take it in through our head, through our thinking, planning, analyzing, all of those things. We take in information through our hearts, through our feelings, through our emotions. And we take in information through our body, our gut center, our instinct. And as humans, 100 years ago, I would say our grandparents relied very heavily on the body center. It was about having strength and endurance. It was manufacturing. It was farming. If you stayed home, there was a lot of heavy lifting and work. It was really about strength and endurance, a lot of manual labor, etc., in terms of how we made our living. And then I think for the last 60 years, we've had a shift. What we value now is the head center. Our jobs, our leadership strategies have been focused on the mind. It's all about accumulating and effectively mining massive amounts of data and information. For goodness sake, we've got very wealthy parents going to jail for cheating on their children's SAT test. Do we have to say anything more about what we think is important? So I believe we are on the cusp of a very significant transition. And I believe that with the aggressive development of AI, in a very short period of time, there's going to be nothing that a machine will not do faster or better than a human. And it's going to affect every industry, transportation, medicine, finance, everything you can think of. And we need to adapt rather than be replaced by artificial intelligence. So this requires us, I think, to shift to a different center. We need to start leading with our hearts. Because there is nothing that the one thing that a machine will never do is to duplicate our capacity to connect emotionally. Connect with deep sympathy, compassion, trust, to have a shared experience on that spectrum of joy or sorrow or any of those things. We need to lead with EQ. And if we're leading with EQ, that is about us investing in our employees emotionally. It's about inspiring them. It's about helping them to understand and leverage their superpowers as well as their challenges, and to understand the superpowers and challenges of those that they work with. What this brings is self-awareness, other awareness, empathy, and a real positive interdependence. So how do we transition? How do we start to be way showers in that regard? I think we need to start by improving the way we communicate with each other. This is, to me, is the golden rule of just communication in general. Seek first to understand rather than to be understood. All communication should begin with listening first, and all that I'm referring to is the mindful attitude you take in that exchange to remember how important it is that you are taking in and being present to that person. The digital culture has made us a bunch of know-it-alls, and we are obsessed with gathering information that already supports what we already believe to be true, and we shut each other down with it. The ability to actively listen with curiosity and openness seems to be really, really lost. And by the way, listening does not mean not talking. As I said, listening means to be present to that other person. And another thing, just communication in general is very complex. We have innumerable forms and devices, right, for communicating. And communication involves our thoughts and our feelings, which are uniquely wired in us. So we can walk away with either a reliable result or, more often, a disappointing exchange. And I want to talk today about a specific piece of communication. And that is conscious feedback, which I hope, is a part of all of your organizations on a daily basis. So what do we know about feedback? We know that feedback is absolutely essential. It's our primary means by which we grow and which we learn through each other. We also know that feedback can feel like criticism, and we all recoil when we feel like we're being criticized. So how do we convey this really important information in a way that allows the other person to stay open, to absorb what you're saying, and want to act on it? Let's look at the traditional feedback approach, which I'm assuming is probably alive and well in many of your organizations. Telling someone what we think about their accomplishment and how we think it should be better, right? And we've done some really interesting things with this idea, like the old ever-famous shit sandwich, right? Say something really positive and then slip the meat in of what you don't like and what you have to fix, and then end with something nice, right? Not very effective. So there's a few problems with this approach that leading research affirms. First of all, please know that we are unreliable raters of each other as humans, okay? That is because of a cognitive bias called the idiosyncratic rater effect. Our evaluation of the other is very much colored by, number one, our understanding of what we feel that we are rating, our personal sense of what good looks like, our personal preference to leniency or harshness, and an inherent conscious bias called the idiosyncratic rater effect. What it says is that 51% of what I'm conveying to you as I rate you is more reflective of my characteristics than yours. Everything I'm sharing with you is filtered through my biases, my beliefs, my values, the way I was raised, what I think is important. So we really are bad at rating each other. Please remember that. So if someone is giving you feedback, what I suggest you do is to take what they are saying seriously. That's required, but don't take it personally. If you want to be a professional, it's impossible to do both of those. We are only a real source for truth when we're sharing facts or data-based information. Okay? Something else that I think is important. You've heard it say that we learn from our mistakes, right? That experience itself, that's really very helpful. The truth is we don't learn from our mistakes. Right? If you are a CEO, a founder of a startup, and it's successful, the odds are great that if you do a second one, it will also be successful. If, on the other hand, you are that same CEO, a CEO or founder, and it was not successful, good luck. Because if you go to the second one, you don't have any better chance of being successful in that than anybody who's never started a business before. And that's true in many, many ways. So we don't learn from our experience. And why that is because of the attribution theory. The attribution theory say people explain their successes and failures by attributing them to factors that allow them to feel as good as possible about themselves. This is how we are wired as humans. What that means is if we're successful, we attribute that success to internal factors. I really am a hard worker. I'm really skilled at this task. I was really agile and was able to pivot. I'm such a quick thinker. Wow, that's really good. We attribute failures to external results. Okay? Oh, my sales territory is just not as good as Sam's. I have a horrible manager. In the game, those refs really sucked. That's why we lost, right? You hear it all the time. This is a survival mechanism. Our brains help us to feel as good about ourselves as we possibly can. So what that means is by simply offering criticism of a situation or a particular experience will not bring benefit. Even though an individual failed experience may contain really valuable knowledge in and of itself, without the subsequent effort upon that experience to really dig into it and to understand it and to copy it and all of those things, the potential learning will remain untapped. So pointing out what is wrong will not make it better. That's why most feedback interventions are really not helpful in improving the performance. Here's another interesting note. Neurologically, we grow more in areas where we already have greater innate ability. Our brains grow faster where they are already strong. We talk about making people more well-rounded. It doesn't work. That's why cognitive diversity on a team is very, very important. You will not see a marked improvement in a person's performance by offering critical feedback in an area where they're not already naturally gifted. On the other hand, bringing your attention to their strengths, you will get an exponential hit from their learning. So really, our strengths are our developmental areas. We've always been told that it's our weaknesses that we develop. You can give that up because you're only going to get a teeny little bit. And opportunities for feedback are heavily weighted to negative results of behavior, right? Do you generally ask to schedule a meeting with somebody if something's gone well? Of course you don't, because you're too busy running around looking at all the other things that aren't working and pointing those out, right? No, at best what we give is good job. Now here's 3 more things I need you to do. MRI studies show that when we are given positive feedback, our parasympathetic nervous system lights up. That puts us in a rest and digest state. We still have access to our innovation, to our creativity. On the other hand, when we focus on somebody's shortcomings, focusing on them lights up their sympathetic nervous system. It actually puts you in fight or flight. Okay, so all you can think about, the other parts of your brain are muted. All you're thinking about is survival. All you're thinking about is how do I contain this emotion? How do I not defend myself, right? So you're just taking it in, right? You can go back to your 20 minutes later, you can say all the things you wish you could have said. But in that moment, you don't have that capability. So in that state, you cannot process the information someone's sharing with you. It causes cognitive and emotional impairment. So negative feedback may offer you a really quick solution in the short term to an issue, but my question is, are you even solving to the right problem, right? Is it the right solution? And in any case, that person is not learning. Compliments are not actionable. Back to the good job, all of that kind of stuff, right? What you need to do is help dissect the pattern that's working. You need to recognize it. Wow, I heard you pick up the phone and hit that client. That interaction, that was really interesting. You see, I'm just like, that was really, how did you do that? What made you do that? Have you done that before? That's really awesome. So it's really about helping them to recognize a pattern, to anchor it, to recreate it, to refine it. Most of our action should be directed at this, in this individual way that includes co-created solutions to problems that support learning. So, what is the appropriate balance between needing to support our employees' growth and their development with a bias towards learning, but at the same time, directly, clearly, firmly sharing this important negative feedback about a performance issue or a situation that's not meeting your expectations? How do we do both? Renowned relationship expert John Gottman says that the magic relationship ratio is 5-to-1. So what does that mean? He has proven that in a healthy, stable relationship, people share more positive interactions, feelings, all of those things, than negative ones. And what he has determined is that magic number is you need to have 5 positive interactions, experience, exchanges for every 1 negative. It's like, you have to make the deposits in the bank, put the money in the bank right before you can start withdrawing. You have to build a foundation of trust, all of those kind of things. So I always like that as a rule of thumb, and encourage you to think about that, the 5-to-1 ratio. And now, I want to share a process with you that I think you can use to give those negative feedback in a way that will make things not personal, get a great result, make it co-created, etc. You have a copy of it on your table in front of you. And let's walk through it. So number 1, think of giving feedback as a 3-step process, and you follow this every single time with consistency. This is not just at work. This is in your life. This is with your teenagers. This is with your partner. Number 1, observable behavior. Describe a recent example to this person of that behavior, performance issue, whatever that is. And remember, I said recent, so we don't want to talk about things that happened 3 weeks ago, right? 24 hours would probably be a good time. Describe it in such a way that they can get this picture of what you're referencing, and you need to deliver it in clear, fact-based, data-driven statements. If it is not fact-based, data-driven, if somebody could disagree with what you're going to say, don't say it. Okay? So on Tuesday, we had a project meeting, and you agreed to give me the budget by the following Tuesday. Today is Wednesday. I don't have the budget. Then you ask them if you maybe have misstated anything. You get them to actually confirm that what you just said is actually true. It's an important piece. The second piece, the impact of that behavior. Now you're sharing simply from your perspective, and you're going to describe what you think are going to be the outcomes because of that behavior or mistake or whatever it is you did. So for me, I could maybe say, I think we might have a trust issue around reliability. How this affects the team is now everybody else is a whatever week behind. How this affects our client, these are my concerns. So you make them relevant to any constituencies that you think are affected. You share that. You ask the other person to share whatever he wants or she wants to share in that regard, right? And you may find information that you didn't know. Oh, I had already, that's interesting, good to know. You're not trying to get consensus here. What you're trying to say is that we can hold 2 different perspectives, okay? And they're being heard, and they're being seen, and they're being respected, okay? So that happens really pretty quickly. And really where most of your time needs to be spent is on the preferred behavior. So maybe I would start to suggest, recommend, that she consider doing, this might be, if that's the problem, do we need a new vendor? Do you need more resources? Was there more clarity around what the priority was? What's going on here? How do we fix this? Because this is unacceptable. So this is what I'm going to offer. And maybe this is a creative process. Maybe you're writing things on a board, like a big brain dump on what are the possibilities. And of course, they share. They're typically closer to the ground. They're probably going to have more suggestions in that regard. So you write on that. Right? No, the vendor's okay. That was really not this. I think it's whatever that is. And so this is a co-created experience of how do we fix this problem. But what you need to make sure then is that you leave with a lot of clarity around what that next action is going to be, what that's going to look like, so that you can hold them accountable to whatever you're doing. Okay? If you do this, it's impossible to get emotional. It's impossible to take it personally. Okay? So, But it's really important, like I said, that you gain agreement. So, what I want you to think about is how important empathy is. Due largely to social media, I believe that we have built a culture, are building a culture on self-preoccupation. We must find a way to lead with our hearts. We must find a way to lead with emotional intelligence, and that begins with empathy. And to me, empathy, if you believed what he believed, you'd be doing exactly what he's doing. Think about that for a second. People act based on how they see the world every single time. Understanding someone else's story is hard, a job that's never complete, but it's worth the effort. So what I want to leave you with is to suggest that you start leading with EQ, emotional intelligence, instead of IQ, the intelligence quotient. I think that you should put the intention and the focus on actually learning in those interactions. I want you to remember that both positive and negative interactions, feelings, emotions, behaviors are all components in a healthy relationship. But it's important that the positive greatly outweigh the negative if you want to build high-performing, effective organizations that operate on empathy, that operate on trust. Thank you so much.